Hello, meat popsicles. If you've clicked on this video thinking it's going to be me telling you about my experience eating magic mushrooms at a Vipassana retreat, then you would be absolutely correct. Hang around, let's do it. Okay, so I'm not really a short form kind of guy, so if you can't be bothered watching the whole video, then the TLDW basically is that eating mushrooms at a Vipassana retreat is a bad idea. It's a shitty idea. In this video, I'm going to explain to you why I think that is. First, a little bit of context. What the fuck is Vipassana? For the uninitiated, Vipassana is a meditation technique developed in India 2,500 years ago and rediscovered by a dude named Siddhartha Gautama, who later became the Buddha. So the story goes, the Buddha used this meditation technique as his primary tool for achieving enlightenment, and then apparently spent the rest of his life sharing this technique and, trying to awaken the world. The Vipassana meditation technique is actually remarkably simple. Developing your capacity to sit and be aware of sensations in the body. And that's really it. The modern day popularization of the Vipassana meditation technique can largely be credited to a dude named S.N. Goenka. He was born in Myanmar and Burma and was profoundly impacted by this technique when it was taught to him, and spent the rest of his life going around the world developing Vipassana schools where people could come along and spend 10 days sitting in silence and being taught the Vipassana technique and practicing diligently. Vipassana centers are established all over the world, and anybody can sign up and come and spend 10 days being taught the technique and practicing. I did my first 10-day Vipassana retreat several years ago and had a really incredible experience. It was fascinating and incredibly challenging, excruciatingly painful, and just a really interesting experience, and one that I felt I benefited from a lot. It's fucking amazing, and honestly, I can't really imagine what my life would look like or feel like if I didn't have a meditative practice. What the fuck are magic mushrooms? In case you've been living under a rock, magic mushrooms are a cute name for mushrooms that contain psilocybin. Psilocybin being a psychedelic compound that, when ingested, can elicit all sorts of interesting and wonderful psychedelic experiences. Like most classic psychedelics, mushrooms have been associated with this sort of like enlightenment experience or transcendent experience. My first experiences with psilocybin mushrooms were in my adolescence. They were purely recreational, reckless and wild, running around in the field, picking these mushrooms, not weighing doses, just eating up and seeing what happens. We had some incredible times. I reflect very, very fondly on those sort of formative psychedelic experiences in my late adolescence and into my early adulthood, and I really believe that they have informed the trajectory of the rest of my life. Okay, quick disclaimer. Don't do what I do, all right? Don't do what some idiot on the internet does. This is not a fucking how-to video. This is just sharing with you my experiences. And some of my experiences have involved psychedelics. I'm not suggesting anybody does this. I'm just sharing with you my experience. You got it? Okay, peace. Don't be an idiot. The vast majority of my psilocybin mushroom experiences have been purely recreational, in low to moderate doses, with good friends, at parties, at raves, at waterfalls, bushwalks, all that sort of mushroom stuff. And many of them have been super amazing. However, of all of my psilocybin mushroom experiences, a small handful have been what I would consider intentional deep immersion experiences, where I've been taking moderate to high doses in darkness, either in silence or bumping some fucking huge tunes. And friends, these have been absolutely astonishing. And they've been life-changing. They've been fucking life-changing. There's the sort of experiences where you come out the other end and you're like, holy fuck, why doesn't everybody know about this? Why didn't anybody tell me about this? What the fuck just happened to me? That was incredible. So after having kind of done this silent meditation thing and realizing the sort of benefit of that, and also on separate occasions having some really, really incredible transcendent experiences catalyzed by psilocybin mushrooms, me, in my infinite wisdom, decided that I would cross-pollinate those two modalities and see what happens. Vipassana courses run over 10 days, and in that 10 days, attendees take a vow of silence. So you don't speak when you're at a meditation retreat. In fact, you don't even make eye contact with other meditators. The idea is to have an internal experience that is not affected by any of the external environment. So an attempt is made to make those centers very, very easy and tranquil places to be, and there is really nothing to do except for to meditate and to sleep. It's amazing. It's so, so sick. Honestly, just taking 10 days off and not talking and being away from your phone, being cooked for, is fucking sensational. Is the best. You know, friends of mine who are like, oh my God, I couldn't do that. I couldn't not talk for 10 days. What would I do, you know? Not talking for 10 days is one of the best parts. Not having your phone, not having the internet, not having to go to work, not having an alarm. Oh, that's a lie. You do have an alarm clock. There's a gong at 4 o'clock in the morning to wake you up to meditate. But I mean, just being away from all of those regular distractions of our everyday life and conversation, having to engage with other people, that experience in and of itself is incredible. It's fascinating and very, very rare. And most people would never get that opportunity. All of this is catered for at a Vipassana center. When you rock up, there is a team of volunteers there who are there to accommodate for you in this learning experience while you immerse yourself in this technique. It's really very, very special. I fucking love it. And at the end of the 10-day period, I didn't even want to start talking again. I didn't want to turn my phone on. I just wanted to hang out in silence and look at fucking kangaroos. It's awesome. The plan. I was intent on fasting for the first 3 days of the 10-day period. That is not recommended, and in actual fact, any other sorts of practices or modalities or body work, yoga, anything like that is discouraged for the period of time that you're at the Vipassana center. The idea being that you will focus on the Vipassana technique and that technique only. And if there are any other practices that are a part of your life normally, then to put those on hold for the period of time that you're at the Vipassana course. Although that might sound weird and sort of culty and bullshitty, at no point is it suggested that you should give up on any of those other sorts of practices or modalities. There is just a request that you put them on hold for this period of time so you can focus on the technique. I think that's pretty legit. Clearly, on this experience, I went in there intent on eating psilocybin mushrooms at the retreat. So I was breaking all the rules on this occasion. I'm aware of that, and I feel like a bit of a dummy about it. You know, a lot of Vipassana bros might be sitting back and being like, dude, you're a fucking bad meditator. You know, that's so naughty. Like, yeah, I am. I'm a naughty, bad meditator. You're not supposed to jerk off either, but I jerked off in the shower on day 5 and day 7. Bang, bang, bang. I'm a bad Vipassana student. Yeah, sure, okay, you know, I'm naughty. What are you going to do? My decision to fast for the first 3 days was twofold. The first reason being my curiosity to see what it would be like to meditate deeply and intently in a state of ketosis. An effective means of doing so would be to fast for 3 days and see what that was like. The second reason was to go into the psilocybin experience really, really stripped back. The idea being that perhaps if my digestive system was completely empty and cleared out, then I could take very, very small doses of psilocybin mushrooms and get a measurable effect from those small doses. First 3 days I spent fasting. Day 4, I broke fast and I ate on that day. And friends, my God, it was the best bowl of porridge I've ever had in my life. If you want to have an amazing meal, then don't eat for 3 days. And then honestly, anything will be fucking amazing. Have an apple or like a piece of toast. I guarantee you, it'll be the best piece of toast you've ever eaten in your life. So day 4, I ate a glorious bowl of porridge for breakfast and then meditated my ass off, and I ate that evening and rested. I started dosing on day 5. I rose early at 4 a.m. for the morning meditation, went to eat breakfast that morning, and then dosed after breakfast. And I ate 1 gram of psilocybin mushrooms. And then I hit the hall, sat on my cushion, and wait to see what happens. 1 gram was an interesting dose. In some ways, it wasn't really enough. So I was experiencing a little bit of a sort of like giddy feeling, excited feeling in my body. I was feeling a little bit tingly. I often feel tingly in my teeth, oddly enough. And my mind was doing interesting things. I was getting a little bit of closed eye visual. However, it wasn't very pretty. You know, I was hoping, I guess, to have some really kind of beautiful closed eye visuals. And if you've ever had beautiful psychedelic visions, you would know that it can be exquisite. And so I guess it was my hope that I could be sitting there on my little meditation cushion, having just glorious crystalline cathedrals appearing behind my eyelids. That was not necessarily my experience. That 1 gram dose catalyzed some quite dull and pastel closed eye visuals and some kind of murky imagery and some murky patterns. Nothing very pretty or symmetrical, and was really quite underwhelming, even to the point of being annoying, honestly, and feeling just a little bit sort of giddy, and like it made sitting still quite challenging. I didn't really want to sit still at that point. You know, I kind of wanted to stretch and sigh and yawn and, you know, go look at fucking trees and shit. So I rode that 1 gram dose out. It was pretty non-eventful. It was just kind of a murky, sort of boring, nothing experience. It made meditating difficult and wasn't very enjoyable, to be honest. Going into this experience, I'd planned to have rest days in between my dosing days to avoid the build-up of tolerance. For the psychedelic naive, you might not be aware of this, but dosing day after day, particularly with psilocybin, you build tolerance very quickly, meaning that an active dose on day one would need to be doubled on day two in order to hit something like the same experience, and then presumably doubled again on day three to keep hitting that same experience. In an attempt to avoid building tolerance, I decided to have gap days between my dose days. So day 6 was going to be a rest day, and day 7 was going to be a dose day. About halfway through day 6, there was a Japanese dude sitting behind me in the meditation class who started breathing really heavily and then ended up having like a seizure. He had a fit, and people in the hall were quite sort of disturbed by this. And I mean, you're in a very stripped back state where really nothing has happened for several days. And then seeing this dude fit out behind me, some of the girls on one side of the hall started crying, and I was just sitting there the whole time thinking, fuck, I'm glad I'm not on mushrooms right now. He was fine, he came to, and he stayed for the remainder of the course. It was okay. But yeah, pretty stoked that I wasn't on mushrooms on that occasion, because I don't think I would have been able to hold it together. Day 7 was another dose day. I decided to double the dose from last time and take 2 grams. My dosing process was the same. I woke for the morning meditation, had breakfast, and then took 2 grams after breakfast in that break period between breakfast and the next meditation session. Back in the hall, on the mat, trying to meditate. My 2 gram dose was a little bit like my 1 gram dose, only a bit more annoying. So there was a little bit more content in my closed eye state. Still kind of dull and pastely and sort of annoying. I was beginning to see some more vivid visuals, but they weren't the pretty classically psychedelic filigree type of patterns that I was hoping for. Rather, I was seeing some pretty fucking grotesque shit. I was seeing like kind of buttholes with spiders crawling in and out of them, and fucking mouths with several rows of grotesque teeth yawning forever, and like just really weird kind of disgusting shit. It was annoying, and I wasn't like grossed out or like really sort of affected emotionally by those visions. I think I have had enough experience with psychedelics to not really react too emotionally to the contents of my closed eye state. It can be really beautiful and breathtaking, and I enjoy that very much, or it could be disgusting and horrific, but I don't really respond emotionally either way. It's just contents, and I suppose in a strange twist of irony, I'm kind of equanimous to the contents of my closed eye state. Then my internal dialogue sort of fired up, and friends, it was hysterically funny. I was cracking myself up. I was kind of laughing at my predicament and sort of narrating this whole experience to myself, and I was on fire. So much so that I began to sort of laugh audibly and let out little sort of giggles. And at one point, I had to get up and leave the hall because I thought I was just about to burst out laughing. This is a problem. It's not appropriate to burst out laughing in a meditation hall, particularly not at a Vipassana center where you have committed to doing this process and sworn that you are not going to imbibe any sort of mind-altering substances, drugs, alcohol, etc. You make that pledge going into this. To be sprung eating mushrooms, it would just be incredibly embarrassing, and I would almost certainly be asked to leave and not come back. That would be a really, really shitty result. I left and I fucking walked it off and tried to compose myself, and was sort of getting this kind of message. And for psychedelic people, you might know what I mean, where you feel like kind of messages are being transmitted in some way. And the message that I was sort of feeling at that point was, man, what are you trying to do here? Like, what are you doing? Are you meditating, or are you eating psilocybin mushrooms? Because you can do both of those things, but you probably shouldn't do them together. That's a fucking shitty idea. So I went back into the hall and managed to compose myself pretty much for the rest of the day. My meditation was of a very poor quality that day. I was not meditating very effectively. I was very, very distracted by the contents of my closed eye state, and my internal dialogue had all of my attention. Man, it was fucking hilarious. I wish I could remember some of those things. And at the time, I wish that I had a pen and a pad, because I mean, I was knocking them for the fences, friends. I was on fire that day, but I can't fucking remember any of it. Anyway, that evening, I contemplated my experience that day and made the decision to abandon the experiment. I was not comfortable taking bigger doses than that in that sort of setting to risk losing my composure and essentially being sprung, being caught out, being in an altered state in that setting would be so embarrassing. So I abandoned the experiment. I didn't eat any more mushrooms for the rest of that period of time. I then doubled down and focused on my meditation in a very, very serious way. Yeah, committed to that process. The Vipassana technique is really interesting, and it is very, very difficult. To try to implement that technique in anything but a completely sober state is difficult and even impossible. I just don't think it's really possible. However, I do believe that psychedelic meditation or psychedelic augmented meditation is definitely fascinating and is definitely a pursuit that is worth investigating. However, I don't think it's appropriate to do at a Vipassana center. I mean, you've committed to that process to honor the center and honor the people there, honor the volunteers, honor the practice. To take any sort of substance in that setting, I don't think is appropriate. However, I will continue to investigate psychedelic augmented meditation. And in some of my recent ayahuasca experiences, I found that if I can meditate while under the influence, that is when some seriously, seriously interesting stuff happens. I just did an ayahuasca retreat last weekend, and throughout that process, I was able to fall into a meditative state, and it was fucking bananas. That's beyond the scope of this video, but I will make a video unpacking that experience and why I think it's important and why I think it is worthy of investigation. But the conclusion of my mushroom Vipassana experiment was that it's a fucking dumb idea. You're going to do mushrooms or you're going to go to Vipassana. You know, you can choose one of those things, but you don't do them both at the same time. It's fun to eat spaghetti and it's fun to ride BMX bikes, but you don't do those things at the same time. They just don't synergize. They don't work together. They're both really, really fascinating and beautiful things. However, I don't think they work together. I'm sharing this information so that if you're curious about potentially trying to cross-pollinate these two modalities, then hearing my experience might discourage you from doing so. Eat mushrooms and meditate, definitely, but not in a Vipassana hall. What if you want to laugh? What if you want to cry? What if you want to vocalize? What if you want to go and look at trees, which you definitely will do if you're taking mushrooms? Then it's just not appropriate to do that in a Vipassana hall. Anyway, that's it for my mushroom Vipassana experience. It's one of many dumb things that I've done in my life that I've learned a lot from. If you're still watching, thank you very much. Like, subscribe, or whatever, or don't, be cool, be kind, and go fuck yourself.